So, Bony, I know that you describe likability as a strategic business asset. How can engineers kind of build that personal equity, while also maintaining their technical credibility, building those relationships? What can you offer up around that?
One is just caring about what you're doing, just, sitting back and that's a lot of times the young engineers, we send them out in the field just to see things, just observe what's around you. In architecture, someone asks for something and I'm like, why are we doing this? It doesn't make any sense to me. But you realize there's a bigger, higher need. And as you sit back and you start.
What if the secret to building a successful civil engineering career has less to do with what you know and more to do with how likable you are? In this episode, we're joined by Bony Dawood, licensed professional engineer, president and CEO of Dawood Engineering, a Woolpert company. Bony's going to talk about how likability, mentorship, and a strong sense of ownership have helped him scale a people-first firm with a global footprint. You'll learn how engineers can lead from any role, why formal mentoring programs are game changers, and how a strong company culture can drive both innovation and growth. If you're ready to expand your leadership potential and think beyond just project delivery, this conversation will give you a whole new lens on what it means to succeed in civil engineering. In fact, you'll see at my outro at the end, there's really one running theme that's really made Bony super successful as a civil engineering leader. And stay tuned till the end to see what that is. Now, before we jump in, I want to tell you about our AEC PM Connect event, an interactive experience where civil engineers can sharpen their project management skills through real-world sessions on topics like earned value, AI in project management, and risk management. Visit aecpmconnect.com and register today. We currently have events in Kansas City and New Jersey with more coming soon. I'm your host, Anthony Fasano, and this is the Civil Engineering Podcast, the industry's leading show for civil engineering professionals, ranked as the #1 civil engineering podcast by FeedSpot. All right, now I'd like to welcome my guest onto the show for today. Bony Dawood is a licensed professional engineer. He's the president and CEO of Dawood Engineering, a Woolpert company. Bony, welcome to the Civil Engineering Podcast.
Good afternoon, Anthony. Thank you for having me.
No, we're excited to have you here. So, Bony, maybe you can start off by just taking our listeners through your journey into civil engineering and really what motivated you to launch Dawood Engineering back in 1992, which you eventually grew into a multinational award-winning enterprise.
Great. Anthony, I'll try to give you the abbreviated version. So not trying, but, I came from my family of engineers. Father was an engineer, 2 older brothers were engineers. So, I would say engineering was in our blood. Went with my father to job sites at a very young age. So it's always around constructions from a very early age. So engineering was pretty much in the DNA. So there weren't too many other careers I looked at when I became an engineer. But being the youngest of 3 boys, in the back of my mind, I always felt that we should have our own business, which is something that was after college, it just started growing. You start getting obsessed with it, feeling it's the next step. That's what I need to do. Coming out of college, I worked for a couple of firms, did relatively well at a young age. I graduated early and I got a professional license at an early age. And I would say made the decision. What drove me to make the decision was more of how we were servicing our clients. I was working for a firm and there was a little bit of a downturn. And the methods they used got my attention, how they were working with clients, how they're handling employees. Really, I looked at it and felt that it can be done better. It was not a matter of having your own business. It was not a matter of saying you're the president of your own organization. It was more, I can provide better service. I can provide better service and I can take care of my coworkers. That was the driver. So the plan of the blueprint was, I would say, relatively simple. It was more desire, knowing that you had enough confidence in yourself that if things did not progress as planned, you can always take a step back and join the workforce. So it was realistically a journey that started with a simple plan, a plan of providing service, providing value, and building from that.
That's great. And it's very interesting to me. I mean, I'm also a civil engineer licensed, but I'm also an entrepreneur who started this business, the Engineering Management Institute. And I think what you've done there was really entrepreneurial in that you saw something that you thought you could improve, and you wanted to try to improve it. And I like your philosophy of if it doesn't work out, right? I'm licensed, I can get a job as an engineer. So you kind of had a fallback plan there. But, I do think it's one thing to be a civil engineer, be a licensed engineer, have it run in your family, but it's another thing to start and grow a business because it requires a very special, skill set. You could say motivation, determination. Were others in your family kind of entrepreneurial like that, or was it you that was really wanted to get into the business side of it and grow the business?
It was probably pretty much myself. It was two older brothers. They both worked, I would say, in the public sector, transportation department, a sewer authority. It was just something that didn't fit me. On personality wise, it didn't fit me. And I knew it didn't fit me. To me, I was one or more. There's a certain level of competition that overwhelms you. I'm not sure what it is, but it wasn't like that in college. But when I got out of college, it's all about taking the next step. So there was something driving you to move the needle. And to me, it was a matter of defining success. I always felt my father came from a small village in India, Burma area, who really came from very simple background, was transferred to the U.S., lived in a small house downtown in the city. And, I saw what he did, the sacrifice he made. So to me, it was about what defines success. End of the day is where every generation moves the needle. And I felt
Yeah.
it was important for me to move the needle. And so you're constantly looking at a generational movement of a family in the big picture of things.
Yeah. I think it's great. Yeah. That's inspiring. I mean, I think you're right when you say every generation kind of moves the needle is a really good way to think about it. I mean, me personally, my great grandparents came from Italy, and my grandfather, I did a lot of research, and I found his occupation, which said self junk dealer, which was he was finding garbage
Yeah,
and selling it just to make ends meet and survive.
right.
So I think it's inspiring to kind of see where you came from, and like you said, it's a challenge to keep growing, right? Growing your career, growing your skill sets, helping your family continue to grow and progress, and so it's great to see that. And obviously, you've had a lot of success there. And we want to talk a little bit about that today and kind of what you did in growing Dawood, which is now, of course, a Wolper company. So, you built really a people first culture while you were scaling Dawood Engineering into a tier one infrastructure firm. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, when you think about hiring people, which is such an important thing in growing a business, but it's also such a challenging thing today in the civil engineering and infrastructure world because of the competition out there. What kind of hiring strategies or leadership values were key for you to building strong teams across, different industries or disciplines, different geographies? How did that work?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think there's different aspects of it. I've had different hiring managers, seen different levels of success in hiring practices. But one of the areas that I drift back into is I try to really understand the person. So a lot of times when I meet a potential candidate, I spend at least 10, 15 minutes. Basically, I'm selling the company to the candidate. So I'm sitting there and wanting them to get excited. That's to me, that's always important that they understand this is an opportunity. So I want to make sure they understand who we are, who the company is. Here's the opportunity. Lay the groundwork. The next part is try to really delve into why is he there? Why is he pursuing this opportunity? Is it you really gonna need to understand, I mean, I look at the resumes as important in background, but there are times, I look at more than that. I look at their background, their experience, work history, where they worked, but you're trying to understand the individual as best you can in terms of work ethic and vision. And it's interesting. I look back and I tell a lot of people there are times you get these little signals at an interview, something triggers.
Right.
And don't ignore those. There's some instinct. And I've ignored those in the past because there's such a need for hire. and you look back and you realize those are the hires that you probably look back and pause, but there are times, and there's an instinctive nature of just being personable, make them comfortable, try to understand who they are, why they're there, what's important to them. But I think it is. So I spend more time during interviews on that aspect. Yeah, I had one manager that really had very specific guidelines on what he expected from his candidates. They had to be all 4.0 kids and, come from top engineering schools. And I would say great criteria, but it's very hard to meet, and very selective. In long term, it's probably one of the best groups we have, but it's a long, deliberate process. So it depends on growth strategies. There are times you have to be a little flexible because you have to find the right fit for individuals with the various needs out there.
Yeah, I really like kind of your approach there. It's interesting. I did some reading about like these professional sports teams when they go to draft these students from college, and they don't just the good teams anyway, don't just look at their stats and, their size and their weight, but they'll go to the school and talk to the teachers, right? They'll talk to their friends. They'll talk to their family members, of course. If they had a job at the school, they'll talk to their employer there, right? Because they really, like you're saying, want to understand the person, not just, looking at the surface, like the resume, if you will, if it's an analogy, right? And so I think that's really important. And I like what you said in that. I think if you ask the right questions and spend some time with them, they'll, tell you about their goals, about their, what they like, what they're good at, maybe what they don't like. And that can be really invaluable when you're trying to make a decision. At EMI too, we've also had some success in doing a pretty good reference interview. I know sometimes people get far along in the process and they're trying to, like you said, rush into a hire, and maybe you don't take the time to check some references.
Right.
But I found some of our best hires, we would call their employers, past employers, or a reference, and I would hear things like, this person was amazing. They volunteered on their own time to do something above and beyond. And you'll hear certain things like that really indicate to you this probably is the right person for us. So it's tricky because in the AEC industry, it's competitive. People want to hire. People are often, like you said, in a rush to hire to fulfill a need. But at the same time, we all know that a bad hire could come up costing you a lot more, than waiting a little bit longer. So I think, some of those deeper conversations can be very valuable as part of your hiring process.
Yeah, I think you have to look at, for example, I know some of the hiring strategies we've talked about. We've been successful hiring some students from a smaller college near us that just has a newly accredited engineering program, which a lot of the big firms didn't circle through this college. But, for us, we located a strong candidate, probably one of the top performers that we have. So you have to be careful, you have to look under as many rocks as you can, and you have to open up really the specter of who you're talking to, what's your pursuit, but it's really down to the people. There's different paths out there. It's funny, one of my chief strategy officer, he'd been with me for 15 years maybe, he came from the banking industry. So when I interviewed him, I used to tell a lot of people, his resume probably wouldn't have gotten over my desk. But I'll look at resumes myself, even though HR looks at them, I'll look at them myself, I'll browse through them. Something catches your attention, or what it is, something catches your attention. He's been a great hire for us, but so there are times that resumes may not make it past the HR department, which always bothers me that you'll set through some potential candidates, and as a manager, if you really want to hire someone, take the time, just browse to them, take a look at it yourself. It really depends on how great the need is to fill those positions, but you need to engage.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, I think as a manager, as a leader, you need to understand the value of your time and where you should be investing in. And certainly something like this is of the utmost importance, building your team with the right people. So it's worth some extra time for sure. Transform your technical experts into impactful leaders with EMI's Engineering Leadership Accelerator. Tailored for AEC professionals, this program enhances communication, delegation, and decision-making skills. Flexible, interactive, and designed to fit your team's schedule. Elevate your team's leadership capabilities today. Visit engineeringmanagementinstitute.org and click on corporate training. So Boney, I know that you describe likability as a strategic business asset. How can engineers kind of build that personal equity, while also maintaining their technical credibility, building those relationships? What can you offer up around that?
I a lot of times I consider it relatively simple, but as with engineers, sometimes things are never that simple. But a couple aspects of it. One is just caring about what you're doing. Just sitting back and that's a lot of times the young engineers. We send them out in the field just to see things, just observe what's around you. Why you're doing. You're just part of a larger puzzle. You're part of a larger puzzle, and you provide value. I think it's important to understand that how do you teach a young engineer to get ownership of a project? Because at that time, they really don't understand. All they know is performing a certain task. Here's what you're doing. But, and that's something early on, there were times that in architecture, someone would ask for something, and I'm like, why are we doing this? It doesn't make any sense to me. But you realize there's a bigger, higher need. And as you sit back and you start observing, the value you provide with everything you do, and the more time, and that comes with time, but the more you can educate younger staff of the value of the work they're doing, how important it is, the long-term impacts, the implications are significant. Getting ownership of projects. When you say likability factor, it's really a matter of caring beyond just what you're doing. Think about the overall project. Focus, expand your vision of the project. I tell people the story of this one large firm during one of the boom oil and gas days was using about 12, 14 engineering companies, and it went from 14 to 12 to 10 to 2. So we were one of two firms left standing. And so I talked to my managers and I said, think about it. Why are we left standing? There's a lot of smart engineers sitting around that table and possibly smarter than our manager, but why did they stay with us? Because there was a certain level of trust and he listened to what the client wanted. It sounds very relatively simple, but the reliability, the trust, you can call it likability, but it's that you're not asking for something. It's just the way, you're sort of providing a service, you're being a true partner in the opportunity. And it's something that I think when we look at culture within a company, I tell a lot of people with large egos that won't last with our company. It's not about us, it's about a team effort. And that's really important in terms of when we build and hire, we look at that very closely.
Interesting. And that really goes back, and a lot of what you said just right there goes back to what the first thing you said when we started the interview about servicing clients, right? That's why you started the company from the beginning, because you felt like you could do that better. And, kind of what you just said in terms of likability and building up that trust factor, again, is serving the clients, and probably why you were, one of the last companies standing. So kind of like, I would think that's kind of full circle to some degree.
It's an interesting part of that story too. I mean, we had a we had a good manager, client loved him, and he'd always come back and tell us how well he was doing and how much the client liked him. And they gave us more work in Ohio. He was out there working for it. And then I heard the client wasn't happy with some of the work we were doing in Ohio. So like, okay. So I went out to our Pittsburgh office, talked to some of our engineers, and they told me areas that the client wasn't happy. And I said, well, did the manager come in and explain to you why he wasn't happy? What could we have done better? Did we learn from this? The manager basically was, I would say, not really helping his staff elevate the game, meet the needs. He just wasn't. So I actually decided to let the manager go. My CFO wasn't happy with me because he was one of the top producing managers we
Right.
had. And I said to me, it was more important that I had a manager that took responsibility and helped people around him. For him to come back and say, we did great, but our office failed, to me was not acceptable. Not acceptable. It is, we're all in this together. If we did something incorrectly, let's learn from it. Let's work together and move ahead. So there's an aspect of make sure the client's happy, but it's also helping the people that you work with, helping them being better at what they do.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important in terms of growing any company, because one of the things we have here at EMI is we have our values and we have a standard of performance that we've created. And we expect everybody to uphold the standard of performance, which is very much aligned with giving and guiding and helping each other and growing. And I think the important thing is when someone is not following that, sometimes you have to step in and make a difficult decision like you just described, and you have to go in a different direction, right? Even though they may be performing well in their projects, but if they're not upholding our standard of performance that we, have our expectations, it's a difficult job as a leader. But I think if you want to be a strong leader as a civil engineer in your industry, you're going to have to make some tough decisions like that. And hopefully you have a company that has a clear value structure, a strong culture that can support you in making some of those tough decisions. It is really important. Boney, there's another term out there where people say something that can be helpful even for younger engineers is this idea of thinking like an owner, right? Talk to me about what that term kind of means to you and how it can help engineers grow in their careers.
Yeah, I think it's a very important aspect. I was fortunate because I left industry for about 2 years and I came back to industry. When I was down in the DC area, I was recruited by a developer. So I actually worked at a relatively young age. I was hiring engineering companies, and and I quickly learned what not to do and how not to handle clients. Here's a for example. Firm in Northern Virginia. I looked at the project and the design was not very good. Just so I met with the engineering company and said, "Hey, this is where we're designed. You need to fix all this." I said, "Fine." And then they sent me a bill for their time and their meetings, and I thought, "Huh." I was like, "Well, it's a very small, simple thing, but to me, it was just the philosophy of, oh, by the way, I'm showing you what you did wrong." so, 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 so working outside the industry sometimes gives you a certain perspective in terms of how you fit into the puzzle.
Right.
And I've seen individuals leave the industry and come back, understand that aspect better. But I'm not telling everybody to leave the industry and come back, but it is, I think it's a matter of, why is the work you're doing so important? When you over design something or someone comes in and wants to know the viability of a project or the feasibility of a project, making sure that you're protecting his interest and realizing, the importance of everything that you do. And I think a lot of times the young professionals may not really understand the full depth of the impact of the work that they do. And I think, spending more time understanding and having them understand their role, the overall aspect of the company's role within the project, how important of a team player they are, constantly reinforcing that knowledge base. For example, I tell a lot of our engineers, I can find 20 engineers that can read the regulations and tell me how to design a roadway. I'm looking for that one engineer that says, why are we doing it this way?
Mm.
You look for that engineer that there's nothing wrong. Most strong agencies will not mind someone asking him, why are we designing it this way? So it's one of those things that you're looking for the individuals to ask why not? Why are we doing it this way? And that's really what separates the strong professionals.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. So, Boney, earlier you mentioned the importance of educating kind of the less experienced professionals in your organization. I know that you pioneered a state-endorsed Mentor-Protégé program. Talk to us about what led you to create that, and maybe you could share some of your own experience as a mentor or receiving mentoring in your career.
Yeah. Yeah. I chuckle because I get on my soapbox on occasion. It's fine. So, we moved into become a minority engineering company. And as again, I'm a little competitive. So I became a minority engineering company. There was one dominant firm out there. So I'd go around complaining about this dominant firm. And now we became the dominant firm at the state. And then I wanted to leave the program because I felt it was hurting us and be a prime firm. Why
Right.
should we be dependent on a program? Program is there for you to grow a business so it can be sustainable. The sign of a successful program is when you can lead the program and maintain a sustainable business. That to me was true sign of a program. So we had a large backlog, but we were not winning a lot of prime contracts. So we were always second tier. So I met with the state. central office. Did all this research and met with one of the senior consultant agreements managers and did my own research and said, there's 40 firms pursuing all this work. 50% of the work is going to 10 firms. Everybody else fights for the remaining firms. I said, I can't survive fighting for the remaining work. And I said, so we had a good conversation, but during the conversation, I said, he said, you've got a great business. You've got a great minority business. I said, well, I want more. That's not enough. I want to be a prime. And I said, you should take, and this was a long time ago. And I said to him, you should take a firm like me and help me educate the other MBE firms. And so I spoke to him about it. I pushed it with him. A year, 2 years goes by, and he saw me someplace, and he ran up to me and said, "Billy, that's a great idea. You should pursue that." And I was like, "Well, I think everyone complains there's not enough qualified minority firms. So help them. Help them, giving them incentive." And so it's something that I would say you planted the seed because you felt there was a need. You felt there was a need, and there was a federal program, but it was not being widely used. So I think it was something that I think there was definitely an industry needed help in meeting that need. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of support groups advocating to help those firms grow. So
Interesting. So again, that's something that as a leader, it's one of those things where it's great to have an idea, but then you have to kind of follow through on it, right, to make it happen. And it's a very difficult thing to do, I believe. I think that everyone wants to be innovative today and have these new ideas, which I think is great. But having an idea and bring it to reality is two totally different things. So it was great to see that you were able to kind of have the idea, go back and forth with that agency, like you said, do your research, and then follow through on it. Because if you're an engineer out there listening today, that could differentiate you in your career, because you could bring an idea to your company and they might say, hey, it's a good idea. And then it's kind of up to you to see, even if you get their support, it's going to still probably up to you to be able to bring it to fruition and find the right people, right? And put the right things in place. And that could be a company initiative, or it could be even if you're, involved in your local professional association, right? And you're able to create a mentoring program, or who knows, run a golf outing to raise money for your, civil engineering association, or whatever the case may be. And so I just think that a message that I would have based on what we just heard from Bony and my own experience is there's going to be opportunities for you in your career to grow. You're going to have ideas of things you want to do, but it's really, you have to then take those ideas and figure out how to make them happen, essentially.
Yeah, you have to. I think because if you have firsthand experience, you're a strong voice in the room. And I think it's important if you have an opportunity to speak to decision makers and help them understand, how they can make a difference of what is creating a challenge for you, a challenge for industry. You have to continue. And at that time, I had a lot of data with me. So I was speaking to with some data supported the discussion conversation. And but I think it is firm sometimes. It's just a matter of going through emotions. You really need to protect your interests and really the industry is really broad and quality culture. How can you help each other move forward? So like, for example, the Mentor-Protégé program that was being worked on recently, they were a lot of firms that are already in the business. We're trying to get more work, and I was like, well, that's really not the intent. We're trying to get new firms.
Right.
Yeah. So it's there's always challenges. So
For sure. Once again, we're joined today by Bony Dawood. Bony's a licensed professional engineer, president and CEO of Dawood Engineering, a Woolper company. We're going to take a short break and then come back and wrap up in the final few minutes by putting Bony on our civil engineering career hot seat, and we'll wrap up with some rapid fire questions. All right, so we are back with Bony Dawood. And Bony, it's time for our civil engineering career hot seat. You ready?
yeah.
All right, so first question, do you have any specific rituals you practice every day? Maybe it's a morning routine or a lunchtime routine, or just something that you've done consistently on a daily basis that has contributed to your success?
I think one of the areas I've always felt that you lead by example as a manager, how you lead your life. even to this day, in the business, I've had the business 33 years. Now I'm in a new career path with Wolpert. I'm typically one of the first in the office. I'm one of the last on the office, but it's a productive day. That's just the way you're wired. But to me, it's setting an example, also caring about people around you. Yeah, everybody just manages differently. I wander around every morning. What are you working on? Just even not about work. Just you want to see people. You want to communicate. It's just it's that caring is very
Mm,
important.
that's great. Bony, has there been a book or an author or a framework or something that you've run into in your career that's kind of stuck with you from a leadership perspective that you've leaned on to help you as a leader?
I would say I was probably in a more mentors.
Okay.
I look back at mentors that really set the groundwork. And I was fortunate. I worked in a branch office for a large engineering company, and the vice president. So I worked directly with the vice president, talented individual, but spent time with them, spent time outside the office, played basketball, saw how competitive he was. But what it really impressed on me is how strong the technical aspect of it was, but also the intertwined business aspect, in terms of when he dealt with clients, how he'd handle clients. And that really, I was probably like 24 at the time, I guess maybe 23, 24. But it basically, it sent a message that, we're doing this for a reason. We're performing a service. What we do has value. And when you're young, you don't realize the value of the information and knowledge that you have. And that really made an impact on me. And also the personality in terms of being personal. There was another manager that eventually recruited me from this other manager, but the same reason, it was just a very caring manager. So to me, I looked at individuals that were successful in life, elevated themselves to a certain, but always maintained a level head, in terms of who you are, how they saw the world. Just their overall demeanor to me was probably what stayed with me and probably basically helped me form the way I handle a lot of my employees and the management cycle.
That's great. All right, Boney, the last question I have for you, we call it the civil engineering career elevator advice question. So if you got into an elevator with an up and coming civil engineering professional, which means you only have about 30 to 40 seconds to give them career advice based on all of your experience, what advice would you share with them in that short period of time?
Oh, great question. So, I think my primary recommendation to the individual is, enjoy what you do. Enjoy what you do. Take your time. Assess all the different things that you can work on. And then when you identify what you enjoy doing, then you focus your energy on that area.
That's
I
great.
run into too many engineers that get into a route that they realize 5-10 years down the road they really don't enjoy it. But take your time and really do something that you personally and professionally enjoy.
Yeah, and that's something that I think everyone needs to really think about because, if you start doing things where you're just doing it to do it and you're not really, interested in it, it can become very difficult and you kind of feel more as like you're checking boxes in your career and you're not being fulfilled, which I think is really important. So once again, Bony Dawood, President and CEO of Dawood Engineering, a Wolper company. Bony, thanks so much for spending some time with us on the Civil Engineering Podcast. And, best of luck to you with your new role as a Wolper company. Really excited to see where you go, growing the company from here on out. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Pleasure meeting you, Anthony.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Bony. I mentioned at the beginning that there was kind of one running thread throughout this podcast of what I think made Bony a very successful leader, the one leader that he is today, which is essentially he cared about people. If you think about it, he took the time to look through resumes and spend extra time on it, right? He took the time to walk around and talk to people in their offices and connect with them each and every day. He took the time to create the mentoring program for the minority businesses right? So he really cared about people and he cares about people. And that's something that you can take away from a very successful engineering leader. If you enjoyed our conversation, you can check out Bony on LinkedIn and connect with him. You can also go to dawood.net. That's DAWOOD.net. And if you enjoyed this interview, please subscribe to our channel here. We put out videos like this on a weekly basis to help engineering professionals become better managers and leaders. I'll see you next week.